Step into a hot shower right now in your head. Feel the water, the soap, the smell of whatever's in your bathroom cabinet. Now imagine going a week without any of that. No soap, no deodorant, no shampoo, nothing. For most people watching this, that thought alone is uncomfortable. So here's the question. What did humans actually smell like before soap existed? Were our ancestors walking around in a permanent cloud of body odor, tolerating each other out of necessity? Or is something else going on here? Something that has less to do with hygiene and more to do with how recently clean became something you could buy in a bottle. Let's start with the stranger fact first. Soap, in something close to its modern form, is old, but not nearly as old as humans. Basic soap-like substances show up in the historical record a few thousand years back, made from fats and ash by cultures in Mesopotamia, and later refined by others. That sounds ancient until you compare it to how long humans have existed. Anatomically, modern humans go back roughly 300,000 years. Soap has existed for maybe 2% of that timeline, and daily soap use, the kind you and I take for granted, is barely a couple of centuries old for most of the world. Even once soap existed, it stayed a luxury item for a very long time, something reserved for the wealthy or used for laundry rather than skin. So for the overwhelming majority of human history, nobody was lathering up every morning. And yet humans survived, socialized, formed relationships, raised children. So something else was handling the job soap does for us now. One wrinkle worth noting, that early Babylonian and Egyptian soap wasn't for bodies at all. It was mostly for cleaning wool and textile. Even the Romans, who loved their baths, skipped soap on skin in favor of olive oil and a scraping tool called a strigil. Soap as something you'd actually rub on yourself is a surprisingly late addition to the story. Here's where we need to understand what body odor actually is, because most people think of it as a hygiene failure. It isn't. Sweat itself, fresh out of the skin, is nearly odorless. The smell comes later, when bacteria living on your skin start breaking down compounds in that sweat, specifically the kind released by a type of gland called apocrine glands, concentrated in the armpits and groin. Those glands didn't evolve by accident, and they didn't evolve to embarrass you. Researchers who study this think apocrine sweat evolved partly as a chemical signal, carrying information about identity and health. A well-known line of research has suggested people can subconsciously pick up on immune system differences through scent, which may have quietly shaped attraction, though later attempts to replicate those findings have been mixed, so scientists are still sorting out how strong that effect really is. In other words, body odor wasn't a bug in the system. For most of human history, it may have been doing a job, communicating things a nose could pick up that eyes couldn't. That reframes the whole question. If odor was partly functional, then the goal for ancient humans wasn't necessarily to eliminate it the way modern culture tries to. The goal was managing it, and there's strong evidence they did exactly that, using tools that had nothing to do with soap. Water was the first and most consistent one. Bathing in rivers, lakes, and natural springs shows up across nearly every ancient culture archaeologists have studied. It didn't require soap to be effective. Plain water physically removes a huge portion of surface bacteria and loose debris, which is most of what drives odor in the first place. Some ancient groups took this further, using natural abrasives like sand or fine clay to scrub the skin, essentially exfoliating in a way that stripped away oils and bacteria along with dirt. Clay in particular shows up again and again, not just for cleaning but for its natural absorbent properties, pulling moisture and odor, causing compounds away from the skin. In some regions, particular clays were prized enough to become trade goods in their own right, valued for their absorbent, skin-cleansing properties, not just as raw material. Then there's ash, which sounds strange until you understand the chemistry. Wood ash mixed with water and fat is essentially proto-soap, and multiple ancient cultures independently landed on some version of this combination, sometimes centuries before anything we'd formally call soap existed. The fat helps lift oils from skin, the ash provides a mild alkaline effect that helps break down grease and bacteria. It wasn't packaged, it wasn't perfumed, but chemically it was doing real work. Plant oils and resins did double duty. Many ancient cultures applied scented oils, not primarily to mask odor the way modern perfume does, but because certain plant compounds have genuine antibacterial properties. Oils from specific trees, herbs, and resins can actually slow bacterial growth on skin, which means the same substance being used for scent or ritual was quietly functioning as odor control too. Some cultures developed elaborate oil blending traditions passed down for generations, part cosmetic practice, part practical hygiene, long before anyone separated the two ideas the way we do now. And smoke deserves a mention here as well. Sitting near fire smoke, whether for warmth, cooking, or ritual, likely helped mask body odor and may have had some antibacterial effect on skin, something some cultures probably noticed and leaned into, even without understanding the microbiology behind it. So the picture that emerges isn't a species helplessly reeking through history until soap rescued them. It's closer to a set of independently discovered, imperfect but genuinely functional tools: water, abrasion, ash, oils, smoke, all converging on the same basic outcome soap gives us today, just without the branding. But here's where we have to slow down, because it would be a mistake to imagine every ancient human smelled roughly the same, or that odor management looked identical everywhere. It didn't, and genetics plays a real role here that's easy to overlook. There's a specific gene, ABCC11, that determines whether earwax is wet or dry, and it turns out that same gene strongly influences how much odor-producing compound your apocrine glands actually produce. A particular version of this gene, extremely common across East Asian populations and far less common elsewhere, results in dramatically reduced body odor, sometimes low enough that deodorant becomes almost unnecessary. That's not culture, that's not hygiene habits, that's inherited biology, and it means some ancient populations were dealing with a genuinely smaller odor problem to begin with, independent of anything they did or didn't wash with. It's a good reminder that a single gene, quietly inherited, can shape an entire population's relationship with something as personal as scent. Diet mattered too. What you eat changes the compounds your sweat glands release. And ancient diets varied enormously by region, season, and available food. Populations relying heavily on certain meats, spices, or fermented foods would have produced different odor profiles than populations eating differently. And that variation existed long before anyone was comparing hygiene routines. Climate factored in as well. Hot, humid environments accelerate bacterial growth on skin, meaning odor control mattered more urgently in some regions than others, which likely shaped how aggressively different cultures pursued bathing and scent practices in the first place. Groups in cooler, drier climates simply had less biological pressure to solve a problem that barely existed for them in the first place. And social status wasn't equal either. Access to clean water, oils, and time to bathe wasn't universal even in ancient societies. Wealth bought more scented oils, finer clays, and more leisure time for grooming in many ancient cultures. But it wasn't universal. The Romans, for instance, built public bathhouses that were remarkably cross-class, so clean wasn't always a luxury good. So even within the same culture, at the same moment in history, body odor and hygiene weren't one uniform experience. They varied by geography, genetics, diet, and social position, the same way they still do today, just without a drugstore aisle to even things out. What all of this adds up to is a much more interesting answer than "they just smelled bad." Ancient humans weren't failing at hygiene. They were operating a functional, if imperfect, hygiene system built from whatever their environment gave them: water, ash, clay, oils, smoke, layered on top of genetic and dietary differences that already shaped how much of a problem odor was to begin with. Modern soap didn't invent cleanliness. It industrialized and standardized something humans had already been managing in scattered, resourceful, regionally specific ways for hundreds of thousands of years. So maybe the real shift isn't that we became clean and they were dirty. Maybe it's that we outsourced a problem our ancestors used to solve directly with river water, ash, clay, and whatever grew nearby to a bottle that does it for us in 30 seconds. Their solutions were slower, messier, and less standardized, but they worked well enough for the species to survive, bond, raise families, and build entire civilizations, none of which required a bar of soap to make it happen. Next time you step into a hot shower without thinking twice about it, remember that behind that convenience is a couple hundred years of engineering standing on top of a few 100,000 years of humans figuring it out with river water and wood ash. If this changed how you think about what clean actually means, drop a comment and let me know if you'd survive a week using nothing but what ancient humans had.